Hello, Imaginers, and happy almost New Year. I wanted to talk to you today about the importance of celebration and why it is so important to our human brain. I think about so many New Year's Eves and New Year's starts in my life, and it always feels like a new beginning. But it also is such an important time to reflect back on the year before. And there's actually a neurological reason that we should be celebrating. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. Celebrating is part of the human experience that helps us to anchor in to our new reality. If you've ever had a moment where something substantial changed in your life and plenty of time had gone by that your brain really should have sort of sunk in to the new reality, but you find yourself making choices, believing that your reality really hadn't changed, and even making decisions that support your old reality. The example I always give is if maybe you've lost some weight and you continue to buy the old size. It's because your brain hasn't anchored in, hasn't settled in to the new reality. And so this is why we're finding such a focus with athletes on rest, because rest is actually the time that their brains can also acclimate in addition to their bodies. And we know that with athletes that your body actually changes during rest. It's actually not during the time of motion. And our brain is a little bit the same way. We believe that our brain changes during high bouts of productivity, high bouts of accomplishing things. But in reality, our brain doesn't change until we settle in to the actions that we've taken, the new thoughts that we have. And so today I want to give you a bit of a process for acclimating into what can be permanent change. Over the past year, we've all experienced ongoing continuous change. I think we're all waiting for sort of the new normal to happen and realizing that the new normal is happening as we speak. And there will be a continued settling in to what that new normal is. We know now that there's going to be ongoing change that kind of becomes part of, I believe, part of our permanent lives. And so I want to help you with a process to, as you are making changes, making new decisions in your life, taking a small step to the life and career that you imagined, you can give your brain a practice to help it settle in to the new change. Because otherwise, if we don't settle into the new change, our brain actually believes that we haven't made a change. It's not wild. So our brain will continue to seek out additional aspects of the change, or maybe a higher level of the change, because it literally can't tell that we have made a change because we spend such a little time settling in. And this is where celebration can become such a vital aspect of that sustained change. And let's face it, as a society, celebrating is something we do really well. But I think that sometimes celebration can be focused on some external things versus some internal things. And the internal things, the thoughts, the sort of acclimation that we take with ourselves is actually what makes a difference in terms of settling into that new change and having that new change become part of your new identity. Because as I said, otherwise, your brain doesn't know you've made a change. This is why you continue to buy the wrong size clothes. This is why you continue to think, well, I haven't hit the next goal yet. Or, yes, I've taken a small step to the life and career that I want, but I haven't reached it yet. So I can't celebrate. And in actuality, your brain doesn't even think that you have reached that first step. And so it won't let you continue to go to the next step until you acclimate, settle in, anchor in, sometimes we call it in the world of neurolinguistics, which is really telling your subconscious that a change has happened. Again, I think we're all great at telling our consciousness that something has happened. Again, it's New Year's week, which means that New Year's Eve is coming up, and we are celebrating for many of us that we made it through this really tough year. But what I want to encourage you to do is really think about, what are the successes that you've had over the last year? How have you evolved as a person? How have you taken some small steps to a different kind of life that you want? Or maybe that different steps for a life that's kind of been thrust upon us. There are things that have happened in the world that none of us probably would have chosen. But so many of you have acclimated and changed and evolved so beautifully. And I want you to give yourselves credit for that. So again, let me walk you through this process for how to cement that celebration, that's holding space for those beautiful things that have happened over the past year, so that they become permanent and your brain doesn't continue to seek out something that you've already done, and you can actually move ahead to the things that you want to do next. So, as I mentioned, we tend to spend a lot of time in celebration, which can be kind of external facing. We might celebrate with a sparkling glass of something, or some time with family or friends. But I want you to think about, how many times have you gone to a New Year's Eve party or spent time with family or friends on New Year's Eve and actually talked about the success you've had over the past year? It tends to be again, more of an externally based experience. And so this year, I want to encourage you to spend some time again on that internal. And so for me, celebration is really using that beautiful experience where we as humans come together and we can start to acclimate into that change. And then eventually that change becomes permanent. As humans, we actually really benefit from doing something physical. So there's a reason that it feels more tactile when we do things like clinking glasses on New Year's Eve, when we maybe have a dance party on New Year's Eve, maybe we wear different clothes. I'm in my sparkles today. We doing things that are physical in some way, tactile, that involve, an actual physical object, actually really helps our brain to acclimate into the change that we've made. And this is why, as a society, there is so much ritual involved in change. If you think about, again, New Year's Eve, you might wear some sparkles, you might light a sparkler, some fireworks, you might clink your glasses. All of those are physical representations of the change that's happening into the new year and celebrating this past year. But again, as a society, we tend to keep that as at a fairly sort of high level, one might say a superficial level. And so if we want those changes to become permanent, we need to take it to, again, a more physical, tactile combination with actually acknowledging the changes that we have made, the progress that we've made, the lessons that we've learned. And so the way that I go about this process is I take some time around every New Year to write down the changes in my thinking, the actual accomplishments that I've made over the past year, the lessons that I've learned, all of the things that I really can see a difference from the beginning of the year till the end. You know that if you've watched some of my past videos, that I undertake a process of a vision board and actually tie that to the outcomes that I want to have for the year, which I teach in my practices, which is really just what do you want to be able to say at the end of your life? And then we create a work back plan for you to get there. And so there's a 1-year plan that correlates to that. And so at the beginning of the year, around New Year's Eve, I will always do a visioning board, and those correlate again to my outcomes for the following year. And so for me, during this time of celebration, I'm going to be looking back at my vision board and the goals for the year, which I do review on a regular basis. And I look at where I have, created motion. And sometimes motion is taking some things off my plate that I decided don't want to do anymore. And sometimes motion is a lesson that I learned from doing something that failed miserably, which I always call learning now. I don't call any of it failure. But it is for me a time to really hold space and acknowledge what the past year has included, because oftentimes, again, our brain can't even see the progress that we've made because we just take such little time as a society to acclimate into it. We are better, I think, at celebrating it, but I think very few of us take time to acclimate into it. And again, that acclimation is actually how you create permanent change in your brain. So one of the things that I also do is write down the top 10 things that I am proud of over the past year. I'll be sharing those in my weekly email this week. If you'd like to see what those are, sign up for my weekly email and you can see some of the things that I'm proud of. And a lot of the things that I'm proud of this year are things that I have changed from a really more of an evolutionary perspective. So things like belief systems, things like thoughts that I had a year ago that I've evolved into something that really serves me more. So it's not as much of the sort of what we would consider the output, the accomplishment, we would call it, but it is really how have I evolved my brain so that those outputs and accomplishments happen more naturally. And the way that they happen more naturally is because I have made more of a permanent change in my brain to really become a habit. And that is the best news I have for you. I think we believe that we've all used willpower for so much of our life to get what we want. And we believe that that's really how you create accomplishment and success, which is really a form of sort of white knuckling. Right? You think about if you squeeze your knuckles, your skin actually starts to change, right? It changes the tone. And that is because we are working so hard to sort of stay in that higher determined space. But in reality, if we will take time for acclimation, that sustained change will actually become a habit. And again, that is the best news I have for you. I sadly lost a friend a few months ago, and one of my proudest moments over the last year is that I spoke at her service. And the reason I was asked to speak at her service is because I was vulnerable and brave and wrote a tribute to her. And I was thinking about another friend of mine that I lost a little over a year ago, and I wasn't even the same person a year ago. I wasn't vulnerable and brave enough and courageous enough to really write the same kind of tribute to him that I did to her. And if I hadn't taken time to hold some space for what I am proud of, I would have never realized that beautiful evolution that I have made, which is to, again, stand in that hard place, that really uncomfortable place of vulnerability, and really sort of feel all the feelings and not kind of stand in a little bit higher place of, what is sort of, I was kind of reading the tribute I did write for him, and it was just a little bit higher level. And so actually on his birthday this year, I rewrote something because I realized again, the evolution that I had made over the past year, and being more comfortable in that vulnerability, being willing to be more courageous and really write something that was more from my heart. And so that's a small example of a way that, as I really looked at what I was proud of over the past year and how it had evolved from the year before, I could really see the progress in myself. And I could really see that evolution. And again, when it came to writing for my friend this year, I didn't even have to think about it. It became a habit to be vulnerable, to be more courageous. And that is the trajectory that you can create in yourself as you start to create time for celebration, acclamation, and permanent change. And not having to sort of use, willpower, which unfortunately we will always run out of, and instead use what becomes the same habits that we use to brush our teeth and know how to, get to our office space or the grocery store. We just go onto autopilot. And that is how you can use the same habits that you create for those kind of things in your life to create the thoughts and belief systems and ultimately the automatic action to create the career and life that you imagined. So as we again are in New Year's Eve week and starting to head toward the new year, I hope that you will take some time to really think about, what am I proud of over the past year? And then find a way to spend some time in acclamation. And I encourage you to do something physical as part of your acclamation. So again, a dance party with yourself, high-fiving yourself in the mirror for, some substantial period of time, not just once, maybe high five for everything you write down, but try to do something physical, because that really cements and helps you to settle into that acclamation. And then over time, you'll start to see that becomes a habit. That becomes the way that you automatically exist and make decisions and take actions in the world. And again, that's the best news I have for you. Stay tuned next week when I'm going to walk you through my process for creating goals for the next year. Again, as I mentioned, I use an outcome process. And so I'm going to walk you through a mini approach for creating some goals based on what you want to be able to say at the end of your life. I'm going to do it a little bit differently this year. If you watched last year, I used my vision board and created outcomes and goals for the year. This year, I'm going to still create goals and outcomes, but I am going to focus on the thought work that is behind it, because we can create goals all day long, but if we are not identifying what thoughts and belief systems are holding us back, then those will continue to be obstacles. So I hope you'll join me next week to walk through that process. But again, I am positive that each of you have made extraordinary progress in the past year. And that can be learning, that can be starting to noodle something new, that can be taking a small step. And so again, I know that there are a myriad of accomplishments that you can write down. I just encourage you to do that and then take some time to acclimate and make that permanent change. You know that I'm cheering you on to the life and career that you imagined. And I hope that you will take a small step to this process to acclimate into those new habits. Take care, everyone.